Imagine a man barely 20 years old inheriting an empire teetering on the edge of collapse. Now imagine that same man, within a decade, conquering lands from Greece to Egypt, from Persia to India, fighting undefeated in every battle, reshaping the world forever. This isn't fiction. This is history. This is the story of Alexander the Great, one of the most extraordinary figures to ever walk the earth. In the next 8 minutes, you'll witness how a young Macedonian king defied the odds, built one of the largest empires the world has ever seen, and left a legacy that echoes through time. Stay with us, because what you're about to see is more than just war. It's a saga of ambition, betrayal, brilliance, and a dream that almost conquers the known world. Alexander was born in 356 BC in Pella, the capital of Macedon, a small but rising kingdom in northern Greece. His father, King Philip II, was a brilliant military strategist who had unified much of Greece under Macedonian control. His mother, Olympias, was fierce, spiritual, and deeply devoted to her son. She told him he was descended from Achilles, and Alexander believed her. But what really set Alexander apart wasn't just royal blood, it was education. His father hired none other than Aristotle to tutor the young prince. Under Aristotle, Alexander learned philosophy, science, medicine, and literature. More importantly, he developed an insatiable thirst for knowledge and glory. To conquer the world, Alexander once said, "You must first conquer yourself." And that he did. In 336 BC, when Alexander was just 20, King Philip was assassinated, stabbed by a bodyguard during a public celebration. The court was in chaos, enemies circled like vultures. But Alexander acted fast. He secured the throne, silenced rebellion, and ordered the execution of rival claimants. Then he marched through Greece to reaffirm Macedonian control. Cities like Thebes resisted, so Alexander destroyed it entirely, sparing only priests and poets. The message was loud and clear: challenge me and you will be erased. With Greece under control, Alexander turned to his father's unfinished dream, the invasion of Persia, the greatest empire of its time. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander set sail across the Hellespont, now the Dardanelles, with an army of about 40,000 soldiers. At the age of 22, he entered Asia, not as a visitor, but as a conqueror. He arrived in Troy and paid homage to his hero Achilles. According to legend, he ran a race around the tomb of Achilles and said, "Fortunate was Achilles to have such a faithful friend in life and a great poet to sing of his deeds after death." This wasn't just a conquest. It was a mission to live out the legends of old and to become a legend himself. Alexander's first real test came at the Hydaspes River, modern-day Turkey. Persian satraps had gathered an army to stop him. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Alexander charged across the river on horseback, leading his cavalry head-on into the enemy lines. It was bold, it was reckless, and it worked. The Persians were crushed. Alexander's reputation was sealed. Young, fearless, and utterly undefeated. This battle opened the path through Asia Minor, and city after city fell to him, often without a fight. As he moved through Anatolia, Alexander portrayed himself not as a destroyer, but a liberator. Greek cities under Persian control were freed, local leaders were allowed to stay in power, and temples were respected. This won him allies. But make no mistake, he was no peaceful diplomat. Rebellions were met with swift punishment. In Gordium, he faced the famous Gordian knot, a complex tangle of ropes tied to a chariot. Prophecy said whoever could untie it would rule Asia. Alexander drew his sword and sliced it in half. Symbolism mattered. In 333 BC, the Persian king Darius III finally confronted Alexander at Issus with a massive army. Darius outnumbered him, some say by hundreds of thousands. But Alexander, using the narrow terrain to his advantage, split the Persian lines and drove straight toward Darius's chariot. Panicked, the Persian king fled the battlefield, leaving his army and even his family behind. Alexander captured Darius's wife, daughters, and mother, but he treated them with dignity and kindness. Even his enemies couldn't deny his nobility. Issus wasn't just a battle, it was a psychological blow. The invincible Persian Empire had been shaken to its core. After Issus, Alexander marched down the eastern Mediterranean coast. Cities like Tyre and Gaza resisted. They paid dearly: sieges, destruction, and total defeat. In 332 BC, he entered Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator from Persian rule. At Siwa Oasis, he visited the temple of the god Ammon. There, the priest declared Alexander the son of Zeus Ammon a divine being. He didn't argue. He even founded a new city, Alexandria, which would grow into a great center of learning and culture for centuries to come. Alexander now turned east, toward the heart of Persia. In 331 BC, he faced Darius again in the decisive Battle of Gaugamela near modern-day Iraq. The Persians had war elephants, elite cavalry, and over 200,000 soldiers. Alexander had 47,000, but he also had brilliance. He used a feigned retreat to stretch the Persian line, then drove his cavalry straight through the gap toward Darius. Again, the king fled. The Persian army collapsed. Darius was now a king without a kingdom. And Alexander? He was the new king of Asia. After Gaugamela, Alexander entered Babylon, one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. The people welcomed him. He marched on to Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of Persia. There he did something shocking. He burned the royal palace to the ground. Some say it was revenge for the Persian burning of Athens. Others say it was drunken madness. Whatever the reason, that fire symbolized the end of the Persian Empire. Darius fled again, but would soon be killed by his own men. When Alexander found his body, he wept and gave him a royal burial. With Persia conquered, Alexander pushed further east into modern-day Afghanistan and India. In 327 BC, he crossed the Hindu Kush and faced fierce resistance from local tribes. The most famous battle came in 326 BC at the Hydaspes River against King Porus, who had war elephants. The battle was brutal, muddy, and bloody, but Alexander prevailed. Impressed by Porus's courage, he made him an ally and returned his kingdom. But by now, his soldiers were exhausted. They had marched for 8 years across thousands of miles. When Alexander tried to go further, they refused. He turned back. On the return journey, Alexander led his men through the harsh Gedrosian desert, where many died from heat and thirst. Back in Babylon, he began plans to unify his empire, mixing Greek and Persian cultures, encouraging intermarriage, training Persian troops, declaring himself a god king. Not everyone liked it. His own generals grew uneasy. Then, in 323 BC, at just 32 years old, Alexander fell ill and died. The exact cause remains a mystery: malaria, poisoning, or exhaustion. Alexander died without a clear heir. His generals, called the Diadochi, carved up the empire into rival kingdoms, leading to decades of war. But his legacy lived on. Alexandria became a cultural beacon. Greek language and ideas spread across 3 continents. His campaigns inspired future conquerors, from Julius Caesar to Napoleon. He became a myth, a legend, a symbol of ambition unchained. Even today, over 2,300 years later, his name is remembered. Because Alexander didn't just conquer land, he conquered history. He crossed continents, fought hundreds of battles, and never lost. He changed the course of history before most of us finished college. But perhaps the greatest mystery of Alexander the Great is not how he conquered the world, but how he dreamed it was possible in the first place.